What we know is that humanity is changing the Earth's climate, especially causing global warming. It's doing that by emitting greenhouse gases, especially carbon dioxide, but also nitrous oxide, methane, and a number of industrial chemicals into the atmosphere, where those chemicals act like a kind of thermal blanket, so that when the solar radiation hits Earth and is reflected again, or emitted again, I should say, as infrared radiation, that blanket of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere captures the infrared radiation and warms the planet. We are on a path of global warming. That warming is destabilizing the climate system. It's causing massive threats that I will describe in just a moment. But it's what brought the governments to Paris at COP21. And what they did was to say, here is how we can implement the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change that we had signed a generation ago, back in 1992 at the Rio Earth Summit, but have not yet put into implementation. And the Paris Climate Agreement is the first global agreement to implement the Framework Convention on Climate Change. And here is the essence of the Paris Climate Agreement. If you have to boil it down, it says, stop global warming before we wreck the planet. And specifically what the Paris Climate Agreement says is that we should hold the increase of temperatures caused by human activity to well below 2 degrees Celsius and pursue efforts to limit the increase of temperature to 1.5 degrees Celsius or lower. Now, what does that mean? What this means is that the rise of temperature compared to the pre-industrial average temperature of the planet should stay well below 2 degrees Celsius, and we should pursue efforts to keep it even below 1.5 degrees Celsius. So keep in mind that these numbers refer to the increase of the Earth's average temperature relative to the pre-industrial temperature of the planet before human activity started to warm the planet. But what's the problem? The problem is we are extraordinarily late in the day. This is a famous graph made by NASA and the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration of the United States that shows the estimates, but really deep, careful scientific estimates of the rise of world temperature. It starts back in 1880. That's when we had the first thermometer readings of the planet's temperature. It brings us up to 2016, and you see an upward sloping graph. Now, here's what's really frightening. In 2016, the temperature for the Earth as a whole is approximately 1.2 degrees Celsius warmer than the pre-industrial level. That's shocking. Here, the Paris Climate Agreement said, stay well below 2 degrees, aim for 1.5, and now I'm telling you, we're already at 1.2 degrees warmer. We're almost there because we've lost a lot of time to actually do something. A little bit of that increase, maybe about 0.1 of 1 degree Celsius, is due to short-run conditions, especially the El Nino phenomenon in the Pacific Ocean. So the scientists say that if you take out the short-term fluctuations, the average temperature on the planet now is about 1.1 degrees Celsius warmer than the pre-industrial level. We're more than halfway to that boundary that we must not surpass. And that's why that sense of urgency is so great. Now, when the negotiators met in Paris in 2015, they confronted a map like the one you're seeing. This is a map that shows the temperature anomalies of the planet, in other words, being warmer than usual. The whole map's red. This means that every place in 2015 was warmer than usual. And the fact of the matter is that 2015 was the warmest year on instrument record dating back to 1880, but probably the warmest year for thousands of years on the planet, as best we can reconstruct temperatures before we had the thermometer readings. Now, the truth is, it's even worse than that, because 2016 is proving to be warmer than 2015. 2016 is going to be the warmest on record, beating the 2015 record. So we're on a dangerous upward trajectory. We're far more than halfway to the limit that was assigned in the Paris Climate Agreement. We face tremendous dangers. What dangers? Here I have to refer to climate science, because it's the scientists that are telling us here's what the real dangers are likely to be. And this is a graph that is produced using the so-called paleoclimate record. That means looking at the climate record in the ancient history of the planet by using very sophisticated measurements of isotopes and other tracers to estimate the temperatures and the carbon dioxide and other features of the Earth going back hundreds of thousands of years. Well, what this graph shows us is that if you look all the way to the right of the graph, where we are today, it's labeled 0. That means 0 years before the present. That means right now, right today, we're in a very warm period because of this global warming. And the last time the Earth was as warm as it is right now, you have to go towards the left, and lo and behold, you get to a point 130,000 years ago to find a peak in temperature that is comparable to the current temperature. That peak is what the scientists call the previous interglacial period, the last period after the preceding ice age, and it's called the Eemian period. Now, in the Eemian period, about 130,000 years ago, Earth was a little bit warmer than it is right now. Why do we care about the Eemian? Because if you look at the blue line at the bottom of this graph, there's something absolutely terrifying, which is that when Earth was in the Eemian period, the scientists have shown that the sea level was about 6 meters higher than now. 20 feet by American measurement, 6 meters. Oh my God. Can you imagine the oceans being 6 meters higher than now? I live on a small island economy called Manhattan, New York City. 6 meters sea level rise would put Manhattan underwater. And what the paleoclimate record is telling us is that we're very close to a tipping point where the ice sheets in Antarctica, the Greenland ice sheets, could be degraded so much, could melt and break away, that they raise the ocean level by several meters, inundating much of civilization. Many of the greatest cities in the world built near the coastlines. Many of the low-lying countries of the world, the small island economies, Bangladesh, which is a river delta of the Brahmaputra and the Ganges River that is basically at sea level, would be essentially inundated. And we're very close to this. And perhaps that process is already in train, say some of the leading climate scientists in the world. This map, produced by NASA, our space agency in the United States, shows the areas in red that would be underwater. Well, my home is one of them. But you look at the coastlines all around the world, look at your cities. This is what we're facing as one of the truly imminent threats, imminent on the time dimension perhaps of decades or a century or 2 centuries, but we're putting this in motion if we do not keep the temperature below what was true in the Eemian period, for example. The risks are absolutely enormous. Look at Indonesia, gone. Look at Bangladesh, gone. This would be a devastating, devastating hit to humanity at our own hands by our own short-sightedness. So this is why the Paris Climate Agreement was reached. There are many, many threats to global warming. Rising sea level is one of them. Intense storms is another. increasing frequency of droughts and floods is yet another. Emerging diseases that are temperature dependent, such as many of the newly emerging diseases carried by mosquitoes, such as the Zika virus, which has an enlarged span the warmer the planet, more intensive transmission of malaria to more parts of the world, crop failures because of rising temperatures, human discomfort and loss of productivity because of rising temperatures, heat waves that cause deaths by the thousands, tens of thousands, could be devastating. These are all the risks that led the entire world to come together in December 2015 and say, we need to agree on clear goals to keep warming well below 2 degrees C, to pursue efforts to keep warming below 1.5 degrees C. This is what it means to move towards a goal-based global system. In future chapters, I'm going to talk about how we now implement those agreements that were reached, how we, in fact, as a planet, can work together cooperatively to achieve those limits on warming and keep ourselves safe and keep future generations safe.